Okay. All righty, welcome everybody to Ann Arbor Solar Stories. I'm going to share my screen. There we go. All right, this is where you are. You are at My Solar Story, Ann Arbor version. Tonight, we are going to be hearing from Ann Arbor resident Dilip Das. And Dilip is a dear, dear friend of mine for almost 20 years, probably short of 20 years. When I was talking to him earlier today about how he would like me to introduce him, he said, why don't you tell them that I was born in Ann Arbor. I work at U of M in Ann Arbor. My partner and I have two daughters born and raised in Ann Arbor, and my middle name is Ann Arb. and these are things that is something I did not know about Dilip. Apparently his father was so happy to be a resident at University of Michigan that he actually named his son Dilip Ann Arb, which I think I'm just delighted to know. Anyway, so Dilip is going to be talking to us tonight about his solar array. The financial sponsors of the My Solar Story events are the Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy, McNaughton McKay Electric Company, and Harvest Solar. So we thank all of them for their support. If you're watching this live or recorded, you should know that on the first Thursday of every month, we do this, Ann Arbor Solar Stories, hosted by me. I'm Julie Roth. I manage the Solarize Ann Arbor program. I'm a senior energy analyst at the Office of Sustainability and Innovations for the city of Ann Arbor. On the second Thursday of every month, there are clean energy seminars hosted by Mark Clevey, the GLREA vice president. And these are a lot of fun, talking about all different kinds of issues around clean energy. The third Thursday of each month are Detroit Solar Stories hosted by Diane Van Buren. And the fourth Thursday of each month is either a My Solar Story somewhere else in Michigan or an energy Q&A where you can come and get all of your energy questions answered by all these energy experts and wonky people who get very excited about energy and hang out on the GLREA Zoom stories. This is the Great Lakes Renewable Energy Association. This year, they are celebrating their 30-year anniversary. It's a 501c3 nonprofit formed in 1991 and supported by members to educate and advocate for renewable energy in the Great Lakes regions. And they do a lot of that, education and advocacy. They're a fantastic organization. That said, you can help the GLREA either by becoming a member or renewing your GLREA membership if you haven't. You can financially sponsor GLREA membership for a local teacher or student who might be interested. You can encourage others to attend GLREA or become members. And if you'd like to just give them money, they like that too. You can make a financial donation to John Freeman and support the GLREA that way. So that is my introduction. And now I'm going to hand it over to Dilip, who's going to tell us about the solar arrays he's had since 2019 and everything that he might want you to know about that. And Dilip, you can, present for as long as you want to present, usually around half hour, I think I've mentioned, and then we'll open it for questions and Dilip can hopefully answer many of them.
Okay, thanks, Julie. So, I mean, I would say a big part of my motivation for this, I think it was split. It was maybe 50-50 at the time, but it's now much higher in motivation for climate emergency reasons. The other 50% was also split between, that 50% was split between saving money and sticking it to DTE, and not, getting, getting less power from less power from them as possible. Generally, is what I was hoping for. So the other reason, and baked into that, was that there was still a 30% federal subsidy, which is significant. It's still significant. I'm not sure what it is right now. It's either 20 or 25.
26.
26, got it. That's still significant. So it's still a huge incentive to do it. I also know a person that I admire a lot who has a farm and operates his entire farm and house on a sun tracking system in his field. This is Joe Trumpy, and Joe also built his own straw bale house. So there's no wiring. He's off grid entirely, and his entire operation, including his shop, his wood shop, is run by the sun tracking solar arrays in his field, which, the field is accompanied by a herd of English cows and a bunch of sheep as well. So he's all in as far as being off the grid and being somewhat food independent as well. A massive garden. They're not preppers by any means. They're peaceful people. I really don't believe they own weapons. He's an artist, and his wife is a sixth grade teacher. So that was an inspiration to me as well. Just good people living off the grid, off the sun entirely. Now it's really become about not so much, kicking DTE as much as I can, but really just about trying to contribute to reducing oil and gas as much as possible. And so, because we are in a climate emergency. So let me shut up there for a bit and just see. Let me share screen and show you what I've got. There we go. So this is the materials for our system. And for those of you who geek out with materials, you can get a sense for what we're talking about. 22 panels, 315 watts each. They cover 90% of our south-facing roof. So it's not an insignificant quantity. I wish it was more. We don't have any really other roof that would work for us. And so I filled it up with as many as Matt thought we could get away with. So that's where that stands. Any questions about that in particular?
What was the cost of the total system?
Okay, let me get to that. Essentially, it was $19,000 up front, and then I got a 30% reimbursement of that via the tax bill.
And you do not have any batteries in the system?
No. I would like that. So this is, I think this is the August, oh, there we go. July 28 to August 25th of this year. It doesn't cover as much as I wish it covered. Now, some of this is the DTE bill. Some of this is due to, slowly weaning ourselves off as a family as much electric energy as we can. Some of this is a squirrel planted a black walnut that gloriously shades our deck. And, the black walnut grows, believe it or not, as much as 6 feet on good years. 6 feet it gains, not only in height, but also in breadth of branches on really good years. In other good years, it's even 3 feet. I mean, it grows really well. Our neighbors hate it because of the walnuts, and they butchered their half of our tree this summer. But I've got to do some trimming at the top. So there is some shading that I have to deal with. And so this reflects part of that. But you can see, this is our bill, and you can see the kilowatt hours, and you can see some of the decreases. So it's not enough in my view. And we have to do more as a family to just literally pare down the amount of electricity that we use. So this is another problem. It's an evolution that we're moving toward. It's not immediate. I wish it could be immediate. I'd love to live off the grid where everybody would be forced to conserve. But we are pampered and entitled in being on the grid and used to this. So my goal is to just cut this out and, eventually build out where there's nothing here. Another thing I would say is we, for a couple of other reasons, for 2 reasons, we got rid of our gas range. For 3 reasons. One, it was malfunctioning, and then finally DTE came and declared it a hazard and unplugged it and turned the gas off. 2, we discovered that daily use of a gas range does contribute, not only carbon monoxide, but other noxious gases in smaller quantities into the house, which, is unnecessary. And I don't know how damaging it is, but why do we want that? Why do we want to pollute our own house? So it's fairly, the data is pretty clear about that the use of gas ranges contributes to indoor air pollution. And 3, because induction ovens and stovetops have really increased in efficiency and effectiveness. And so we got an induction stove, and we're inspired by that by Julie and Randy as well. And we love it. It's quick, it's efficient, it's easy to clean, and it doesn't use gas. The next step is trying to eliminate our older furnace. And so we're actively looking at opportunities to replace that furnace, which is obviously the largest user of gas in our house, and eventually the water heater as well. So we're hoping to do a complete electrification over the next several years, and then hopefully building out with more solar wherever possible. to do that as well. So I think those are the key. Let me go back to this one. There was another slide I wanted to show here. Let's go back here. This is the total. You can take a look here of the total costs and the project description and kilowatt hours as well.
Mr. Das.
Yeah, please just call me Dilip.
Dilip. Let's see, my name is Paul Erickson, and I'm calling from Southwest Michigan.
Yeah.
When you before you initiated this service, did you shop it out to several companies, or did you just go with them, or how did you initiate that decision?
Well, I attended an event held at several schools across Ann Arbor that I believe the city of Ann Arbor sponsored. Julie, you can check me on this. I don't know whether you were engaged in that or not.
It was probably before my time.
Yep. So I believe it was in 2018. And they were talking about the benefits of solar, household solar. And they brought in a half dozen or so providers. And we got to talk to them, and they did a slideshow and so forth. So that was my first introduction, was these series of solar events at public schools around Ann Arbor that were trying to convince people to do this, and they provided solars. Now, the first person I signed up with provided the different kind of panel, and I'm not going to be able to tell you which, but it is more expensive, but it is more efficient. So there's a different panel that does provide a higher level of kilowatt hour possibility per panel. Now, I was nervous because of the cost, obviously. And when I was working with them, they got my name wrong, and they submitted it to DTE with a wrong name. And because of my nervousness and my annoyance at them getting my name wrong and submitting it to DTE for, it was the last year of that process by which if you produce enough energy, DTE has to buy it. I forgot the name of it.
Net metering. It was the last, you got in just under net metering before it switched to the current inflow outflow method of reimbursement.
Right. So
but that depends on the utility, as I understand it. Not all utilities honor net metering in Michigan. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah. Dilip, do you want to, if you want to stop sharing, maybe we can see faces a little bit better. Yeah, that's right. So my understanding, and Dilip, you can jump in if you want, but my understanding is Dilip got in under net metering, which meant that DTE, our utility, was reimbursing for his overproduction at full retail rate. And I think, Dilip, I remember you saying that was one of the reasons that made you go then and not think about it more, is because that was sunsetting, that was going away. And now DTE pays at, it's very complicated, but about half retail rate for your overproduction. So it's really lengthened the amount of time it takes to pay off your solar array. It's still by a couple of years. So it's not totally devastating, but it's not great either.
And Paul, just so you know, that what Julie is talking about it's called distributive generation. And Indiana Michigan Power, if that's your power supplier, they also don't do net metering anymore. It's the distributive generation. So essentially all the investor-owned utilities in Michigan are only paying about half of the retail rate as a credit for the extra electricity that's put on the grid.
Yeah.
And certain companies like consumers don't pay anything.
No, they still do.
Oh yeah.
They still do.
Yeah, consumers pays about 50%. In fact, consumers got exactly what DTE received. And that kicked in essentially on January 1st of this year. So,
but as I understand it, net metering, it may cease to exist in the near future.
Well, for all intents and purposes, it doesn't exist now. The only difference is that if you got your system installed before the date of the new policy, that current solar owners like Dilip have a 10-year grandfathering clause. So they will continue to get net metering for 10 years from the date that he installed the system. And then once that 10 years is up, and presumably he would have paid off his system by then he will then transfer to the distributive generation tariff as well.
Okay.
I saw someone hand. Jennifer, you don't look like Jennifer.
I'm not Jennifer, I'm Johannes. That's my spouse. So, Dilip, I just had a quick question for you. This sounds all very interesting, but I'm wondering, I'm a newbie in this whole thing. We're thinking about putting a system like that in. And I was wondering, I think you said it's 22 panels. My two questions were, A, how many square meters or square feet, if you're more comfortable in that system, how much space is that? And second, what percentage of your energy needs does this cover? Whatever you have now on your roof.
Yeah. I'm going to disappoint you because I don't have good numbers on that. I'm trying to look at the thing as far as square feet. It's not, I don't have a big roof, south-facing roof. 22 panels, each panel is, it's approximately like 2.5 feet by 4 feet, sorry. And that's not a good measurement either. I can't tell you what that's going to be, but so I'm sorry, I can't give you a real, in terms of space. It's a relatively small house, 1,700 square feet. So it doesn't have a big roof. So I think, I'm not sure about this, maybe others know, but many solar panels are similar in size. And so if we figure out what the typical size of a solar panel is multiplied by 22, then we'd be able to get total square feet.
This is John Freeman again. I think this is a really important question for people that are brand new, but the way to approach this is a little bit different, that you are allowed to put a system on your house that will generate the same amount of electricity over the course of a year that you have used, as you have bought from DTE or consumers for the past year. And so typically the approach to getting a solar system is you will send your most recent bill to a solar installer, and then they will take that one bill and they will figure out what the total yearly amount of electricity that you have used in the past year. And then they will usually they use Google Maps, they will look at your house and your property, and they will figure out how many panels that you will need in order to generate that same amount of electricity that you've used over the year. And then they'll use, through Google Maps, they will look at your roof and see whether your roof has enough space for all those panels. Now, the one wild card in all this, and this is what Dilip made a reference to, is that the efficiency of panels is rapidly increasing. In other words, you can generate more electricity from a panel now than you could 5 years ago. So what that really means is that you may in fact need less panels than a few years ago in order to generate that same yearly amount. But just like Dilip said, the higher the watt panel, they tend to cost more. But the size is pretty much the same. It's the same standard size that all panels come in. So this is the process you will use with your solar installer. And GLREA recommends that you work with 3 different solar installers, get 3 different estimates, and that you use this process to learn about solar and ask all sorts of questions, because it's our experience, our business members are so happy to be able to explain solar to you, because they're just as passionate about installing solar as Dilip and all the rest of us are about getting solar. And so they are more than happy to take the time to answer all your questions. And then you should really use that time to gain a comfort level, just like Dilip did with Matthew Cadwell, who is a great guy, and Sumpter Solar Services did a good job. But we have lots of other business installers that do a super job as well. But they all essentially follow the same process.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I was going to go with the smaller one. I was close to getting the higher efficiency one with one installer, and then I freaked out because I think my documents that went to DTE had the wrong name on it, and I used the F word with him because I was exasperated. And he decided to drop me as a client because of that. So I didn't get the higher efficiency panels because of my, my inclination to use the F word.
Salty language, right?
Yes.
So,
okay.
So Dilip, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Sorry. I just got a quick question. Going back to what you said initially, so I guess this begs the question, and this presentation is probably going to go in an area that many newbies, including myself, are concerned about getting the best deal for the money spent. I recently had a sit down with a representative from Power Home Solar, and their offer for 20, at least 22 panels was over 6 figures.
What?
So,
Oh my
6
God.
figures.
6 figures, yes. So I find that hard to believe. So
I mean, you saw my numbers. Yeah,
right, going back
you
to
saw my numbers. 22 panels, 19 less, 30%.
Right. So
Yeah.
Going back to my initial question, it was sessions like these are very helpful to allow the consumer to shop out the deals. And what are some of the better companies out there that make a market for installation in this state?
So I want to jump in here for a quick second. Are you in Michigan?
Yes, I am. Yes.
Okay.
We're in Benton Harbor on the lake.
Nice.
In Berrien County.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
So there is I work for the city of Ann Arbor, and what we rely on to choose installers that we'll work with in our programs is an organization called Michigan Saves. And if you go to michigansaves.org, or I think that's right, they have lists of contractors. Michigan Saves functions as a green bank. And it connects people with low interest financing for energy efficiency upgrades. That includes solar, but also installation, air sealing, electrification, et cetera. But they also keep lists of contractors. And if you search residential, you can search for solar installers, and they do a baseline vetting of installers. I would start there. The model, and I'm sure that John Freeman can talk more about this, but the model that Power Home Solar uses, my understanding is it's a different model. It's like a leasing model, correct? Like that you paid off over time. But they don't tend to, they have a high pressure sales pitch and a very, very, very inflated price point. What you should be looking at from the average cost of solar, if you take your number, Dilip was what, 19,000 or something before any tax credits or incentives. You take that number and you divide it by how many watts. So Dilip has like 6,900 watts. That gives you your price per watt. And different solar installers, sometimes it gets tricky to try and figure it out, because this one's recommending a 6 kilowatt system and that one's got a 5.5 kilowatt system. And so if you want to just get the baseline, how much am I paying for a watt? You do that math. And that way you can compare. Now, that doesn't mean you'll always choose the lowest price per watt. Certainly not everybody chooses the lowest price per watt, because they may want, like Dilip was saying, a very high efficiency panel to make use of a small roof, or they may want to go with an installer who's been in business for a longer time, or they like their ethic, or their warranties on their panels, or there may be a million reasons that people choose an installer. But I agree with John that you want to do your due diligence and talk to at least 3 and get estimates and talk with them, and certainly don't let anybody pressure you into sign right now, this deal goes away like that. That's I don't know if that's what you experienced, but yes. Stories I've heard.
We experienced that quite quite vividly.
Yeah. No.
Yeah. And let me just
can I just say, Paul, I experienced some hard sells from one of the, I think 3 or 4 people that I talked to, or that came over and looked at it. And there's no need to go with them. And I didn't. But the other factor is, Paul, is that there are so many companies in this market right now, and they have previous clients. So I look back, and they gave me previous clients, and I actually called them and talked to them. What was the process like? Did it work out for you? And so, companies that don't provide you with names and numbers of previous clients are ones I wouldn't go with either.
And this is John. GLREA is a trade association, and we have many, many solar companies that are members of ours, and including Michigan Saves is also a member of ours. And Patrick O'Boyle is actually on our board of directors, and he works at Michigan Saves. So Julie's advice is a good one, but I can also, Paul, send you 3 solar installers that are GLREA members that we know very well, and they all are professional, and they don't scam people at all. And I can send it to you, and you can then follow up with them. But Power Home is controversial, and so that's why that we recommend you get multiple bids, and that 6 figures is outrageous. And it's so I'm really happy you came on this program, because that is the purpose of this program, is to educate new people about solar.
John, I was wondering, is there a way you could put some of these names?
Sorry, I think Clyde, you might. Clyde, can you mute yourself for a quick second? I don't know if that's why we're getting feedback.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Is this Clyde?
Yeah.
Clyde, you're pretty choppy, and we're getting a lot of feedback.
Is that better?
As the host, you can also mute a participant.
Okay, it's quiet now. I think, let me see.
Maybe they could ask the question through the chat.
Yeah, Clyde, I can't seem to mute you, and there's some feedback. Could you mute yourself, your own microphone, and then ask your question in the chat box instead. Oh, perfect. Thank you, Clyde. Sorry about that. In the meantime, Jennifer and spouse, I forget, why don't you ask your question, and then we'll see if Clyde can get his into the chat box.
Yeah, my name is Johannes. All I wanted to say is John made some really good points about different kinds of providers that have a good track record and are members of this association. So I'm wondering maybe it can put some of these names, or at least any URLs, any kind of information that we can use into the chat. So we have a place to start, because we're really newbies and we really would like to start on a good foot.
And you have, and you guys, so I know that, I think it was Paul earlier is in Benton Harbor. So he would need installers that install up in that area, which is, a different group. Not installers don't go from Detroit to, Traverse City, and they tend to be regional. So, I don't know, John, does GLREA have a list of installers that are members, or? Oh, look at that. Someone just posted something.
Yeah. Dale Klein just referenced, these are a list of installers on our website. And if you want to send me an email, Johannes, I can also send you, installers that are you in the Ann Arbor area as well?
Yes, we're on the Old West Side.
Okay.
I don't have your email though.
I just put it in the chat. It's the letter J.
Oh.
Freeman,
okay.
1313 at comcast.net, NET.
Okay,
so,
I'll take it off the chat.
Okay, and I see that Paul put his email, so I will send him a list for Southwest Michigan.
Okay.
And tell me this, John, and others. What's the nature of the additional battery backups? I suppose we'll cover this with Dilip's presentation. I don't mean to jump the gun. What do people do in this space? Do people buy the max amount of battery storage? Do they not? How does this work?
I don't have battery storage, Paul. I haven't purchased that yet.
Okay.
But I can, unless John, you want to.
Oh, go ahead, Julie.
Okay. So yeah, battery storage is definitely optional and dependent on the individual and what your goals are for your solar array. So the positives of having a battery for backup are that, so if you don't have a battery and you have solar on your roof, then what happens when the power goes out because of a storm or whatever outage, your system also gets shut off automatically. And there's actually a good reason for that. And that's that your solar, if you're still producing, overproducing what you're using, you can flow energy out into the grid. And if there's a line worker that's trying to fix the lines because of an outage, they can get injured. So the utility mandates like an automatic off. So you don't have that backup power, even though your solar panels are up there and maybe it's sunny and that's kind of frustrating. You don't have power because of that. If you have a battery, then instead of switching off, your solar array switches to island mode, which is sort of means you can keep using it. It won't backflow onto the grid, and it will also utilize your battery if necessary. And then you can use your battery for backup. So if resilience is important, and if you lose power a lot, which some people do and some people don't, really depends on where you live, if your lines are buried and how good the infrastructure is in your neighborhood. But if you lose power a lot, then a battery is nice. It acts kind of like a generator, just like if you were to get a gas generator backup, with some exceptions, because it has a finite amount of load before it renews itself the next sunny day, right? On the other hand, the downside of a battery is its cost, right? They're still fairly expensive, somewhere between $10,000 and $15,000, I think, for a battery. So having said that, you can spend $10,000 on a gas generator too. So it really depends on what why you're getting a battery, in my opinion, and what it's for, and whether you want to go that route. I don't know if anyone has anything to add to that.
I just have 2 quick points. That everything Julie said is spot on, but the price of batteries is coming down very dramatically as well. Because of the increase in electric cars, you've all seen the announcements by Ford Motor Company building 2 huge new battery plants in Tennessee and Kentucky. General Motors just announced yesterday they're going to gear up the battery research in Warren, Michigan. And of course, Tesla is their massive battery manufacturing in Nevada keeps increasing, and they're building a new plant, I think, in New York State. So the price of batteries is going to come down. And the other thing about getting batteries, which I think is a plus, it goes back to Dilip's point about wanting to stick it to the man or stick it to DTE. If you don't want to play the game of only getting 50% of the retail rate as a credit for exporting electricity back to the grid, if you get a battery, then you just dump the extra electricity into your battery, and then you tap into that in the evening. And that way you're pretty much consuming all of your energy. One other strategy that some people are doing to address Julie's point about the additional cost is that rather than putting a solar system that will cover their full year of historic load, they're only getting enough panels to cover about 75% of their historic load. And then the money they save on not getting panels for the last 25%, they are then spending that on batteries in order to keep the complete price down. And that way the price becomes more reasonable. And then down the road, they can always add additional panels to cover the last 25%.
I want to elevate a question that Dilip had actually for the group. He wrote in the chat. Dilip, you want to say it out loud for the group?
Well, as John was saying, efficiency is going up, increasing every year, and cost is coming down, not only for panels, but also for batteries. So that's exciting to me because I sure would love to get a battery because I love that idea of storing energy from my panels into my battery. But when would it be worth it? I mean, at what point is efficiency going up so that even though I just got the panels in 2019, it might be worth replacing some of them anyway, or periodically, because of increased efficiency?
Right. Is there a formula? I'm just curious, Dilip. Is there a formula for that? Is there something that's known in the industry that consumers could calculate?
That's
John?
what I'm asking. Yeah, I don't know that.
John Sarver, do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, there's no doubt that the panels are continuing to get better for a whole bunch of reasons, you know, better materials, better manufacturing processes. It's very unlikely as of today, though, that you'd actually want to get rid of an existing panel and replace it with a more efficient one. That would not be a smart economic move. So that's not something that really is, you know, kind of a logical thing to do. Now, if you've had a system for, you know, 20 years or something, you know, now you're talking about, you know, 10, 20 years from now, of course, who knows what panels will be like. So that is something that's going to become an issue at some point, especially as those of us who've had panels for a while. I've had my first system for over 10 years now. Yeah, but as of today, though, I don't think it's anything that you'd consider or think about because the economics just aren't there now. One thing to keep in mind too, you know, a number of, there's wide variation in prices when you get proposals from different installers, which have always been puzzling to me, but I've never been involved with a home project that hasn't had a huge range of prices. Now, one thing that could be a factor there is some installers now are automatically making part of the package the batteries. And obviously, like Julie had indicated, it's a significant cost. So that can explain somewhat the difference in prices. And sometimes you can maybe have a little more efficient panel. But part of the reason that there's such a huge range in prices, I think, is that some people want business more than others. A lot of solar installers are very busy, and so they don't really necessarily need your job, and they might give you a high price. That's why it's so important to get those at least 3 proposals to kind of look at the cost and do the comparison, like Julie mentioned, where you're actually looking at dollars per watt, and what percentage of the power is they going to produce. So you can make a fair comparison between these different proposals, because you'll see that there's significant price differences, and some of it is explainable, and some of it is somebody just is more eager to get your business.
Yeah, and the other thing, just to remind folks, that Power Home also loans money to people to install a system, and their interest rates are pretty high. And I want to go back to what Julie said about Michigan Saves. If you need to borrow money to install the solar system, Michigan Saves is the best place to go, because they have very good rates and they're extremely professional and extremely reputable. And we know them very well, and they will treat you superbly. So, but if you can pay cash up front, then you don't want to get a loan, because you're adding to the cost by paying interest. And you also want to make sure, in some cases where a company says, no money down, we'll put the panels on your roof, and then you just have to sign a contract for the amount of electricity that the panels will produce. And that's exactly what Julie was talking about, which is the leasing model. But the company that puts the panels on your roof, they're going to get the investment tax credit from the federal government, not the homeowner. So we want the homeowner to get the investment tax credit. We want you to be the owner of the system. And so if you're able to afford the cash up front, then you want to go that route. And just one other quick reminder, and if the tax credit that you receive is more than the taxes you owe in one given year, then the difference will roll over to the following year until you use up that entire, at this point, 26% investment tax credit. And there's chatter at the federal level that President Biden is trying to get that investment tax credit back up to 30%, just like what Dilip received a couple years ago. So keep your fingers crossed on that one.
I would like it to be permanent, so that we can stop doing this up and down. It's going away. It's going away. I would also like for it to not be a income tax credit, but simply a refund, so that folks who are lower income or older folks who aren't paying that much income taxes can benefit from it as well. I think it's a really non-progressive way of giving that incentive. If we really want to help the people that need it the most to offset their high energy bills, we really don't want to make it based on an income tax credit. But that's my other soapbox. I have a lot of soapboxes. If you give me all night, I'll continue to jump from one to another. Let's see.
Julie?
Yeah.
Could I ask you a couple more things, if you don't mind? A couple of smaller questions. Yeah, after getting the presentation from the rep we spoke with, so certain things may or may not matter on a deal, and I guess it's up to the consumer to decide. But to industry observers, things like the installers themselves, does an educated, experienced consumer care if they're W-2 employees or contractors? Do they care if the company actually monitors it? Do they care about other types of issues that are part of this installation process?
Paul, that is excellent points. When I was talking about why you might choose one installer over another, all of those factors are important. So that's why not everyone's just going to say who's got the lowest price per watt. It's not like 4 dining room tables that are identical and you're just going to pick the one that's got the cheapest. I mean, these are people that you're going to be working with, right? That are going to maybe have a service plan if you need it, or warranty if you need it, or like you said, do they pay their employees a living wage? Are they employees? Or are they contracted? So I agree. all of those things are really important. I was looking for women and minority-owned installers. Those are in short supplies, but those can be important to folks as well. So really good points.
And then also if the panels are made in China or if they're made domestically, is there a quality of care dimension? John, the two Johns, what do you think?
There are not that many panels that are made in America. That's we should just put that out there.
There's a premium, I'm sure, for U.S. production.
Now, that being said, there are efforts to try and encourage the manufacturing of panels in America because, you know, a panel that's made in China may be lower priced, but to get the panel to America, that's more of a carbon consumption. You know, there's carbon energy used to manufacture the panel in China, and then to ship it from China to America on ships, usually powered by diesel. And so there's a carbon component. So there's an argument to be made that if we could somehow get panels to be manufactured in America, then they'll have a less of a carbon footprint because they don't have to travel as far to get to Michigan. But but at this point, you know, China has almost cornered the market, and there are a couple other companies. I don't even think they're American companies. I think they're German and Canadian companies that do make some panels in America. But the challenge is, of course, is that because the utilities are only giving you 50% of the retail rate to put energy back on the grid, and that, as Julie pointed out, makes the return on investment longer than it was under full net metering. So part of the reason we think DTE is doing that is because they want to undercut the economics of individuals installing their own energy system. And so what the installers are trying to do in order to become even more competitive is to lower the price of installing a system. Because as Julie pointed out, if you have to put the full upfront cost of a system, whether it's $10,000 or $19,000 or $13,000 in the case of Dilip, that's pretty expensive. And so, you know, so for working people and low-income people, it's hard for them to come up with that kind of money. So there's this huge interest in keeping the price as low as possible in order to make it possible for more people to participate in the renewable energy transition. So with that being said, having lower cost panels from China is a benefit versus paying for higher costing panels that are made elsewhere. So there are some competing factors involved that you as a buyer should weigh as you think about the system you want to buy. And that's why I go back to my earlier point that if you get 3 solar installers and you get 3 estimates, you know, and you have a chance to visit with the 3 of them, then you can ask them these types of questions. And you can, and specifically, you should definitely ask the types of panels that installer tends to use. Now, all panels are pretty much warranted for 25 years. That's pretty much industry-wide standard, you know, but in terms of, you know, the service warranty, in terms of racking and the inverters, those are other questions that's worthwhile to have a discussion with each of the 3 installers.
And John, in addition to that, I just feel compelled to ask, is there any, the actual panels themselves, is there any rating agencies or any other regulator out there which gives any kind of certification for manufacturers' panels which hit our shores?
I'm sure there is. I don't know what it's called, but like I said, all the panels are warranted for 25 years. So if you install a panel like Dilip did, and then 2 or 3 years from now, that panel just suddenly stops producing power because of some flaw within the panel, that the solar installer will come out and replace that panel for free, you know, because it's a guarantee, it's a warranty on that panel. But, you know, you can go on the internet and you can compare, you know, Ginkgo panels that McNaughton and McKay sell from Ann Arbor to some of the other manufacturers, and you can compare them, I'm sure.
I just also want to make sure that, is there anyone, Dale, did you just raise your hand? I want to make sure that if there's anyone else who has questions who hasn't yet, because we're getting close to the end. Dale. Dale and then Jennifer again. Go ahead.
Typically panels are UL listed. You might be able to find some cheaper panels that you might not want to put on your house that are not UL listed, but typically you want to make sure that the panels are UL listed. And any installer, if it's going to be inspected by an electrical inspector or your township or whatever, they're going to have to be all UL rated equipment, everything, the inverters, the panels, all that stuff.
Abraham.
Thanks, Dale.
Dilip, what is the incline of your roof? What is the if you know what I mean by the incline to the sun?
I'm sorry, I'm not going to be able to answer that. I don't know.
Do you have a steep roof or a flat roof, or like?
It wasn't listed in those documents, and I know that makes a difference. And I'm sorry, I don't have the technical details on that.
I also saw that you have a solar edge system,
right?
The conversion, the inverter system that has a monitoring system and data, which may give you more information also about the production.
I just don't keep that plugged in because it has to be connected all the time. And it was just another piece of machinery that was cluttering our kitchen countertop. And so I chose not to go there. I'm less interested in the technical details of it and just more interested in maximizing the reduction of coal and gas and fired energy. That's real. And I realize that Michigan, by the way, is one of the top nuclear energy producers in the country. So I get that, but it's still quite a bit of gas production going on with DTE. Because I think Michigan is about 40% nuclear total energy output.
DTE is coal.
Okay.
DTE is a mess.
Yeah, we're not, 40% is too high. And in fact,
is it? Okay.
Palisades nuclear plant is being currently decommissioned. So it's steadily going down.
More, yep, go ahead. Oh, okay, we'll take two more questions. And I know that these guys really like us to wrap up at 8 because they just like to respect people's time. So let's go first to Dale and then back to Jennifer, and then we'll call it.
Okay, thank you. I've asked this question here a month or two before. I didn't get an answer yet. Does anybody have a tool like a spreadsheet calculator or any other kind of calculator where you could plug the numbers for your system in and get things like years to pay back, return on investment, net present value, that would actually take into account all the different factors like discount factor and inflation, things like that? That would be really helpful to homeowners, I think.
Have you checked Energy Sage? I don't know if Energy Sage, it's a website.
I have been on there.
I don't know if they have that specifically because different installers will input different numbers.
Yeah. And then PV Watts is a system from the National Renewable Energy Lab. I think that's another system. The challenge, Dale, is that with the new distributive generation tariff, where you have instantaneous inflow and outflow, it's harder to have a spreadsheet because unlike under net metering, where everything was done at the end of the month, the netting of it, it was easier to have a spreadsheet that could take that in consideration. The inflow outflow makes it a little bit more challenging, but I still think you can probably get more of a general understanding of the return on investment with PV watts and some of the other systems.
Okay, because most of the installers are quoting payback time. I don't buy a car or a carpet or a vacation on years to payback. And that number just seems, without knowing where that came from, you know, it doesn't mean anything.
Well, you should definitely ask them. You should be point blank, ask them, how do they come up with those numbers?
Okay.
And because I don't think they've invented whatever spreadsheet tool they use. I think they just picked it up from the National Regulatory Lab, and they might have tweaked it a bit, but just ask them.
Okay.
Yeah, they input like that. There are some things that are subjective or predictive, like for example, how much will DTE increase their prices every year moving forward? Well, you can look at historical data. You can look at expected future data. You can bump that up in order to make it look better. So it's just, some of it, it's just hard. It depends on like what you put into it. But I agree with John. You should absolutely ask the installer to tell you exactly what went into the formula. But there is a formula. I mean, there aren't many things we can do in the fight against climate change that actually have a return on investment that's financial like that, unless you take into consideration the social cost of carbon and the cost of doing nothing, which is incredibly expensive. We just don't tend to think and talk about that. But you're right. It is one factor, though, that enables more people to be able to access this and do the thing they want to do, knowing that it's going to pay itself off for sure.
So it sounds like a consumer needs to create that on their own initiative. But it'd be nice to know if another consumer advocacy organization has created that framework.
Well, if you have 3 installers or 4 installers, they're all going to give you some sort of calculation that they've done. What it comes down to then, you look at the price per watt, right? How many watts are you getting? What's the price per watt? And then you can kind of, you can get a general sense. It's going to be 8 to 9 years. It's going to be 11 to 12 years, in that range before it pays itself off, because your behavior is going to change as well, right? So for me, my behavior changed. I started using less electricity because I became more aware of what I was using, and I'm electrifying my home. So I just swapped out my gas range and my gas dryer. I've got heat pumps dryer now, and that's changed the whole metric. So it's I got an electric vehicle that changed everything. So it's dynamic, I guess, is my point.
And if you end up talking to installers that are members of GLREA, John Sarver and I know them extremely well, and we can help facilitate any questions you have or help to address any concerns you have. And we can pretty much guarantee you're going to get top of the line service from GLREA members because we know them extremely well. And Patrick O'Boyle, just like what Julie said a little while ago of Michigan Saves, he knows them extremely well as well. So.
And yeah, go ahead, Jennifer. You guys had another. Yeah. I simply cannot remember your name because it's not written in your box. So I apologize.
Johannes.
Johannes, right?
Johannes.
Yeah, very, very common name.
3 times. Johannes. Okay.
Exactly. So a quick question is, we have a pretty large roof and eventually we would like to purchase a completely electric vehicle. Is there a way, it seems like there is a cap on how many solar panels you can put up there. Is it at all like unrealistic to expect that one can set up eventually enough solar panels to be able to power the car as well?
Yep.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And when you're talking to solar installers and you're getting into the nitty gritty of what you want, DTE will not approve a system that's larger just because you are planning a purchase of an electric vehicle. If you buy one, then you don't have to show that historic data because you just bought it. But if you bought it, they will account for that and let you upsize your system. But your installer, if they know that your plan is for future electrification, whether it's an EV or something else, then they can design the system with that in mind. So both in terms of the panel placement on your roof as well as the inverter size. Because if they upsize the inverter a little bit to make room for more panels, then they won't have to go replace the whole inverter when it's time to add more panels. So if you know you're going to be doing electrification, that's something to talk to installers about for sure.
Okay,
so Julie,
that makes sense.
Julie, that begs the question then. I just have a quick follow-up to that, if you don't mind. That begs the question
Abraham
then
did
of, that begs the question then about the local electric representative's discretion, it seems, to either approve or not approve your system. Is this part of the installation process? From what I understand?
There's a law in Michigan that basically says you're only allowed to put a system on your roof that will cover your historical use. Otherwise, if you start generating more electricity than you need, and it's significant, then you essentially are becoming a utility. And there are laws in Michigan that regulate what is a utility versus what isn't. Now, the gray area is exactly what Julie was talking about, that as people are starting to electrify or get electric cars, you're not going to have historical data for that. And so in some cases, you will get into a little back and forth with your utility about how big a system if you're in the process of getting an electric car. But Julie was exactly right. If you want to install a solar system now, and 2 years from now, you think you're going to get an electric car, you install the system now that meets your current historical use. You factor in the construction, just like she said about the inverter. And then a couple of years down the road, you add more panels for your electric car and you'll be absolutely fine. So the whole situation is in flux, and it's a very dynamic market right now between the rules and regulations conducting solar versus the transition to electric cars, to electrification of kitchens and households. And that is the other major role of GLREA. Besides educating people about solar, we are in the business of working with the state legislature as well as the Public Service Commission to try and shape public policies to encourage the expansion of solar and to try and regulate bad behavior from the utilities. And in some cases, there is conflict. And so we encourage members or anybody, if you're having a problem with DTE, for instance, you should give us a call, because we deal with this utility on an ongoing basis, and they would rather try and work out a problem privately rather than have someone can go to the Public Service Commission and file a formal complaint against a utility. That's an option. But we can more often than not work out problems with the utility. And this is one area that problems occur between the size of a system someone wants to get versus the size that DTE thinks is appropriate. And we can get involved in that process and help go to bat for you.
That's quite
John,
an offer.
Thank you for that, John.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to give Abraham a chance because he had his hand up too. So
yes, I had optimized my energy efficiency before I decided to put panels, etc., on my roof, and therefore I already had a special target from DTE as being the lowest user of electricity. They didn't realize that I had a management system at home, so that I could divert everything to nighttime cost, which was 4 cents per kilowatt hour in the type of tiered system that I used. So what we did is we actually optimized the amount of panels that DTE would allow, which was 16, 17. And then once it was all, and then we planned to put the largest inverter on top of that. And fully with the plan that once everything is in, we then would add another 15 panels, and we did. 15, 16 years old. So along with, in my case, Tesla batteries, that allows me, except for this month, since March, I essentially am off the grid, but I have 2 Tesla batteries. And the reason why I brought the management question and the solar edge into that as well is that the more data you can collect about your system, you can then start tracking it and really live within your energy means. You're going to have to change. It's a lifestyle change. If you have a family with kids who may not be as attuned to that, it will a management system of various things, various ways. You can do that, but it will really help to bring the rest of the household into living within their budget. You can manage that, but I can explain or expand on that offline.
Thank you, Abraham.
Aren't Tesla batteries dropping in price too? I mean, somewhere between $5,000 and I don't know, $7,000 or $8,000.
I haven't seen them that cheap.
Oh, okay.
No.
Okay, never mind.
Mine were the whatever, the Ultimas or so, the second versions, and they were, I think, $12,500 a piece.
But I think the price is coming down. And the biggest challenge in getting Tesla batteries is the supply. They're hard to get. Right. I only know of one GLREA member that has access to them, and that's the Green Panel out of Brighton. Everybody else tends to go with LG Chem batteries, which are good batteries too, but they're not Powerwall. But
and they have a disadvantage in that they are arranged in series, whereas the Tesla batteries are in parallel, so that the power they can generate, especially if you have, for example, an electric car, the power they can deliver is greater in a shorter amount of time. And right, their management tools are really quite interesting, quite helpful.
All right, we're going to do the absolute last. I think Paul had one follow-up, and then I think we'll call it a night to let John go do whatever else John does when he's done with these meetings.
Just a quick question on a quick follow-up on the warranty, and then another question about sort of the greater picture and cost effectiveness. The warranty. A friend of mine is an HVAC technician, just as an example. And it's up to the manufacturer, apparently. Some warranties will be void on a change of ownership of the home in the HVAC industry. Now, how does the warranty, if it's 25 years is the general warranty for solar panels, is there an industry standard that it does not void? Obviously, that would be anti-consumer for the next buyer if it's within that 25-year spectrum. I'm just curious if it's good. I would think it'd be good for the full 25 years, doesn't matter who the owner is of the property. And the other question I have is, on the greater sense, and the bigger picture is there when you look at all the solar generation that solar panels create, is there a greater standard, like 70 to 80%? Is there a general percentage range of solar of energy needs that are met for a certain household that's within the range as an industry standard? You know what I'm trying to say? So if a person racks up $3,000 a year in total electric costs, right? For people that have had installations of different types from different manufacturers, do they generally say make up 60, 70, up to 80% of that cost?
I think it comes down to your own budget. If you want to replace your entire load from DTE with energy from your solar system, then you have space in your roof or in your backyard for a ground mount system, and you have the means to pay for it, then people tend to go 100%. Now, and particularly with net metering, because the whole reason why net metering and this distributive generation tariff is relevant is that you're going to generate a lot more electricity in the summer with your solar system than you will in February and January and December. So the idea is that the extra electricity you produce in July and August, you bank that in the form of a credit, and then you draw that credit in December, January, and February when it's cloudy out and your system's not producing. So the theory is, and it's a legitimate theory, is that over the course of a whole year, your system will produce the total amount that you need. And you're essentially, if you don't have your own battery system, you're essentially using DTE as your battery system. But now with a distributive generation tariff, where you're only getting 50% of the retail rate, the amount of credit you're receiving is not as high as it once was. And so that becomes a new factor in your calculation. And the only reason why, Paul, I mentioned about some people are getting 75% of their load is because they don't want to send any electricity back to DTE or consumers. They want to dump it into their battery system, but they can't afford a full solar system and a full battery system. So they try and save some money by not getting all the panels you need to cover your entire load. And then the amount of money they don't spend on panels, they then spend on getting batteries. So that's how they kind of finesse it. So it's just to summarize, it's the classic law of unintended consequences. As a result of the utilities trying to reduce the amount of the credit they pay for people for the extra electricity, that the number of people getting batteries is jumping in Michigan. That every year, the utilities have to file a report with the Public Service Commission on the number of solar installations. And they also have to include whether those solar installations are coming with a battery system. And a month or so ago, the most recent report about consumers' energy, that literally 50% of all new solar installations in consumers' energy territory is now coming with a battery system. And that's directly the result of consumers trying to undercut individuals in terms of not paying the full net metering amount, only paying half the net metering amount. So that's a long-winded answer to your question, but I hope I've given you some food for thought.
Thanks, John. That's fascinating. 50%. I did not know. That's really, really high. But anyway, I'm going to call it. I'm going to wrap it because we can,
John,
I mean,
can I just ask about that warranty issue? John, is there any standard on this warranty, or is it just is it just company specific?
I don't know the answer specifically to your question, okay, but I gotta believe that the warranty will be good even if it's a change in ownership, because the solar panel is not going to be dependent upon literally who owns the system, because the key thing about solar is that it's passive. There are no moving parts to a solar system, which is why they're so durable and that's why they're warranted for 25 years. So I think that most solar panel manufacturers, they want to keep in your good graces. And so if you bought a house from someone who already had the solar system installed, and then after 10 years, a panel goes bad, I would imagine they will replace that panel because it's warranted from the original owner. And I would argue that even if the manufacturer wouldn't, the solar installer will, because again, word of mouth is so powerful in this business, and we're all about expanding renewable energy. And so solar installers, as well as solar manufacturers, as well as solar distributors, like McNaughton and McKay is a major distributor in Ann Arbor and Madison Heights of solar panels, racking, and inverters. And so McNaughton and McKay, they've been around for 100 years, and they're in solar big time. So if your solar installer, like Matthew Cadwell, probably got his panels from McNaughton and McKay. And so if Dilip sold his house to someone else and then that panel went bad, I'm sure McNaughton and McKay would go to bat and replace that panel. But again, if you want to get a specific confirmation of that, of that question you should ask a solar installer when you're engaging them in these initial conversations.
The warranties could be different on all the different components too. Like some inverters could be a lot different than what the panels would be. And different components, the manufacturers may or may not cover installation labor beyond a certain point, like usually like a year or two. And the installers may have some of their own particular policy on how long they cover labor, or you might buy, or they might offer a longer labor contract for warranty work too.
I've also seen installers offering extended warranties for inverters. Like this inverter comes with a standard warranty of X years, and if you want an extended warranty, then they're offering that as well. So it's all different for sure. Okay. Dale, you're really making me want ice cream. That looks
thank you very
really
much.
Good.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to push the question and answer time further, but thank you very much for your time.
Oh,
everyone.
Sure. And thank you everybody for coming. I'm going to put my my email in the chat as well at a2gov.org. If you have additional questions, and I know that the GLREA folks are always up for questions. They're really good about that. But I think we have to call it. So I have a dog that needs to go out and he's telling me very loudly. So